Trash, much like this podcast. All right, give me a countdown, Shark. Hello, and welcome to The Right Can't Read, a Trotskyist microsect where we plot to violently overthrow the leadership of the Democratic Socialists of America. I'm your chief Trotsky Pope, Aaron Simon, and wait, this isn't about that? This is a podcast about what? About how the right wing habitually co-opts and twists the meanings of everything from carvings and rocks to pop music? Well, okay then. Again, I guess I'm stuck being Aaron Simon, but I'm here with two other people. Who are you?
I am the permanent co-host for the past 6 episodes, Robert Sharkey. I am the one qualified to say the words pop music on this podcast.
You're
being not Aaron Simon.
Not how many episodes we put out, but just standing in for several.
I mean, I have not written an episode in the past 6.
No, yeah,
I wrote the Shrek episode, actually.
You wrote the Shrek.
Don't diminish my accomplishments now that I remember it.
Who's this other person?
And I am Daniel Griggs. I am a casual observer and got roped into this because it deals with some of my favorite subjects, runes and cultural appropriation.
Big fan of those. And if your name is very familiar. I think, I'm a big fan of this podcast, if I do say so myself. And in all of the show notes, I think I see your name.
I did contribute
to the music guy.
Yes.
You're the music man.
That is me. I am the music man. Yes.
Both the intro and outro to this podcast are the best parts of this podcast.
I was like, that's going to be my greatest contribution to this podcast.
So good.
Yeah, it's good stuff. We always like it. I mean, I go to sleep to it every night. I'm just sitting there going, this is professional. But we're not here to talk about that. We're not here to talk about we're not flattering Daniel. We're not, especially not talking about your forehead tattoo that says the music man.
Right. Yes.
Disturbing as that is. To lead us in, I have a simple question. What are your feelings on the song Shield Wall by Amon Amarth?
So arguably, I am not as familiar, though I am seeing them in December.
Hey, you're going to that show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
sweet.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Bought tickets
we'll meet
2 months ago. Yeah, it should be a wild show.
It's gonna be a good one.
But honestly, I don't know, because as much as I have delved into and been into the mysticism and religion, quote unquote, of Norse mythology and such, I honestly haven't really gotten into the appropriation on any side. It's like. So yeah, I've listened to Amon Amarth, and I think that they are fun, but I've never listened to any of the lyrics because I know this is not them, but more often than not, if you listen to a metal band and read their lyrics, the one that you do like, it's going to be racist.
Yeah. We'll be talking about one dude in particular later on.
Yeah.
But yeah. Shark, I
know
you're
you
a
sing,
big
I was like, can you sing it for me?
No,
maybe I'd remember. No,
I listened back to our Bruce Pod episode, and I thought I was doing like a Dave Von Ronk voice, but it was still very clean musical theater voice. And I'm like, I can't do growl.
After you singing that Dave Von Ronk bit, I have been listening to Dave Von Ronk nonstop, and my wife wants me to tell you that she hates you. Anything that fuels my desire to listen to unlistenable music.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, speaking of unlistenable music, I know you're a big fan of death metal. Shark.
Oh, yeah.
So what are your feelings on?
I would not, for instance, say that Carly Rae Jepsen wrote the best album of the past 5 years. That would not be an opinion that I would propose. Big Amon Amarth stan What's the metal term the kids are using?
I don't know that there is one.
It's just
Is
head.
there?
You
Yeah,
add head to the end.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm
on a Marth head.
I'm true cult from Mars. So, one commonality here is that no one is saying that it's an ode to white supremacy and Ubermensch warrior kings
That we know of.
down
No,
from the
that's-
north. It's probably not. I mean, what it is about is Vikings in battle.
Yes.
And as Daniel was alluding to, with the foreshadowing of appropriation, Vikings in battle happen to be a huge draw for Nazis and white supremacists in general. I don't know about you, but to me, that's no surprise. After all, whomst among us on the left has not seen a tattoo of a Volknut, a giant gnarled tree, or runes, and thought, is this person a Nazi or merely a metalhead?
Those are the three kinds of guys you always question. People with
That's-
Norse
that's
tattoos, Roman history fans, and World War II aficionados. It's like
people
you're
with,
either one kind of person or the other.
yeah,
But you're
people with,
really
like,
into Raiders of the
Marvel
Lost Ark. Yeah.
Yeah. Whomst among, so who has not had this experience, and who among us on the left has not heard a little episode by a little podcast called The Right Can't Read, their episode on metal, and thought, what a life-changing experience. Aaron Simon deserves a Pulitzer and to not have to work in the tech industry anymore. Now, as we'll see throughout the course of our two episodes on Vikings, the presence
Editorial
of
note
Norse
from Aaron
stuff.
Simon to his producer.
Yeah. Remember, we are doing two. Otherwise, we will have rebellions on our hands, Shark. The presence of Norse stuff, whether that's like images of Yggdrasil, runes, Viking flavored metal, or even, I don't know, a dude wearing a horned helmet, it's often a reason to be on your guard. And at the very least, cast a withering side eye. It's going to be hard to do at the Amon Amarth show because Roseland is very dark. As we'll further see, this whole milieu is a huge bummer. But this episode is not only inspired by my true cult status for metal. No, do you guys remember a little thing that happened on January 6th? 2021.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was like a little fascist.
Yeah. Like a get together. Was that in Washington D.C.?
It was a get together right outside the Capitol building. It was a peaceful protest. Merely a few cops were killed. Merely only one person was trampled while waving a Gadsden flag saying, "Don't trample on me." And merely one person was going around with tat gear and zip ties, hoping to.
I'm fairly sure I only remember one Confederate flag.
Only one. There were a few good numbers of Christian Dominion flags.
I've been assured by some people who make over $100,000 a year, though, that it wasn't a big deal, Aaron. So
yeah, you're right. It was not a big deal. It was a little thing, just a little thing. And I don't know. This is going to be hard to remember because it was such a little thing that made no impact on anyone. But do you remember a guy who was known as the Q shaman? I want you to look into your mind's eye. Go into the pineal gland in your head and recall his image. And if you have,
I think I saw him at the Amon Amarth show.
You might have. I think I did too. The last time they were in town. Yeah. He was doing that thing where he was like throwing elbows in the pit, and then got real pissy when people like shoved him into the wall. Yeah. So you may remember this guy had a couple of odd tattoos. One was a giant tree, and one was a series of interlocking triangles. And those you see are associated with Norse mythology and Vikings. The tree is, of course, Yggdrasil, the world tree, which sits at the center of the 9 worlds and which is host to, among other things, a very high-energy squirrel named Ratatoskr. The series of triangles is called the Volknut. Maybe it's Volknut, I don't know. And is a symbol that archaeologists believe is associated with Odin. So to those of us who pay attention to this kind of stuff, not a surprise to see these symbols on someone who seemed to be patently insane. We have seen this guy in a mosh pit expressing the same behavior we just talked about. And indeed, this whole spiel has been immortalized in a drill tweet, which is, need to find out if the eagle tattooed to my son's chest is racist or normal. I really hope that drill continues, despite the Elon Musk takeover.
God, if Elon Musk destroys drill, I will have to.
Actionable threat.
Yeah, I will insert actionable threat.
So I will say, about 8 years ago or so, I got a tattoo on my left arm, on my left bicep. That was, in fact, a Valknut. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea that it had been associated with, like, right wing and Nazis and anything like that. And I mean, I'd kind of heard, and it was like, oh yeah, that's such a far off fringe thing. And then on January 6, 2021, that big fucking tattoo right on his chest for everyone to see. And I was like, no. It was very, very upsetting. It was one of those things where it's like, I have to wear long sleeves now. I can't. I don't want people to associate me with that douchebag.
You could just get.
I could be associated with plenty other douchebags,
yeah,
but not that douchebag.
You could get another tattoo that's got like an arrow going to it, and then the words, "This is a cool one, I swear."
Yeah. I could turn it into like 3 Christmas trees now or something.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe just a paragraph of text about how.
And long explanatory
asterisks at the top of the tattoo.
Yeah.
Yep.
See, like, we're talking about this, and we know that there's history and depth to this, but to the public at large, who are whoa, hold on a second, my door just swung open because of the wind. I love this apartment.
Barry looking incredibly concerned. Do not let the outside world into my home.
How dare you?
It's okay, bud.
Actually, speaking of which, I'm going to open my door. Oddly enough.
Pause. Well, I mean, we can.
We're good.
I guess. I don't know. All right.
Just this door.
Okay. So, we're talking about all this. We know there's context there, but to the public at large, who are presumably not deranged or, not like us, don't spend their time obsessing over these sorts of questions. This is a bit of a quandary, because people might see your tattoo and go like, oh, he's one of them, when you're not, and you don't have the paragraph of text yet. So it's then you have to corner them on the street, and it's a whole thing. So this all resulted in a few questions asked here and there. A pretty lazy Rolling Stone article made the rounds. And then eventually things just kind of evaporated away, and I think most people have kind of forgotten about the Q shaman thing. Or at least, for a while they did, and now they kind of have. But for a little bit there was a thing that happened at that year's CPAC, and the world was treated to some sweet, sweet discourse. TMCR. See, the stage at CPAC bore a striking, almost as if it was purposeful, resemblance to the Otala rune. Now, this rune has meaning that I'm not sure of, but I think it has something to do with property. It was also heavily used by the Nazis, who slapped a couple of serify bits to it. There was an article in Forward about this. The Nazi Party employed a variant rune, of the rune with added serifs, or feet, as the symbol of the SS Race and Settlement Office, as well as a division of the Volksdeutsche, a movement of ethnic Germans who lived outside Germany and did not hold German citizenship. Now, is it possible, in the grand scale of the universe and all of the potentialities therein, that the CPAC organizers accidentally chose a specific design that just so happened to be linked to the Nazis in this way? No, I don't think so. I think it is much more likely that the rune was chosen as the stage design by organizers of a hyper-nationalist right-wing organization as a near explicit link to fascist anti-Semitic ideologies.
I concur. I don't know if you guys saw it. Maybe it was a month or so ago, but a bunch of casual shares of a specific kind of a meme was actually like 3 hooded KKK members, but like apparently, no one even knew, and it was like well, I didn't see that, so I wasn't intentionally sharing KKK propaganda, and it's like
Yeah, you were.
You were.
Know that. I think I saw an article today about like Kyrie Irving. Was apparently like sharing some like anti-Semitic video online and refused to apologize for it. So we're all doing great.
Yeah.
But really,
in a tweet that I thought of you and what will happen to you at some point in your life, Aaron, did you also see Kanye's deranged anti-Semitic rant?
I read bits of it and I was like, I don't want to deal with this.
There was a staffer who worked for, I think, Ilya and Omar, who threw it up on Twitter and was like, the thing about this Kanye rant is that his delivery is so incredibly Jewish. And then people in the fucking corporate media were like, is this kind of the thing you think is funny? And he had to be like, no, I don't think saying Kanye West.
Well, I feel bad for any staffer with Omar because like she can't say a damn word without like the ADL flipping out and be like, she hates us. It's like,
yep.
We're not talking about that. I think the ADL might be a good episode of how the Jews ruin Jews, but we'll do that at a later time. So, both 2021 and 2022, real red letter years for Nazis.
They love the 20s.
Yeah,
they really do.
Since all of this, indeed, since I wrote the script and was trying to make a joke, and now it doesn't feel good to do that anymore. We've seen more and more hard right groups just pop up and do some just attacks on, Muslims, Jews, drag brunches, trans kids, anything in their line of sight that they don't like. That's not trad life. We've seen Sonnenrads spray painted in public areas all over the fucking place. And if you don't know what a Sonnenrad is, well, it's a symbol with ties to Germanic sun wheels. The thing that makes the Sonnenrad unique is that it was created by Himmler's little friends, or Hess's, one of the H guys, one of his friends. And if you're wondering, well, Aaron, come on, it's just a sun wheel. How can you really make this claim? Well, look at it, and you'll see that where like the rays are on a normal sun wheel, those are actually SS runes. So you got a bunch of SS runes all throughout this thing. That's not what you should. That's not the hill that you die on, man. That's Nazi shit. There are SS runes in there. My point in all of this stuff is it's right in front of our noses, eyes, whatevers, and it's getting more and more so every day. If you live in a medium to major size city, you will probably see some fascist graffiti or stickers. Part of this whole struggle against it is to know what to look for. Another part of the fight is to help people reclaim these symbols, much like Daniel in his paragraph-long tattoo explaining how the Volknut is really okay. In my opinion, there's a lot of value in celebrating cultural history. For me, that's eating bagels on Shabbos. For other people, that's wearing Mjolnir as a spiritual icon. You can't give ground on this stuff, but in order to not give ground, you have to know a little bit about where it all comes from and why it gets co-opted. Now, one of the reasons I asked Daniel to join us during this chat is because throughout the course of our friendship, we've shared a few things. One, a deep and encyclopedic knowledge of the pre-Disney Star Wars universe.
Oh, yes.
2, we both have very good dogs.
Oh, that is a fact.
And 3, as you may have picked up, we both have appetites for music that is often what is branded extreme metal. And, I touched on this in our metal episodes, but broadly speaking, extreme metal is stuff like death, black, and drone metal. In many bands in extreme metal, one often finds references to Norse mythology, whether that's Tyr's very name and all of their albums, or the aforementioned Amon Amarth song, Shield Wall.
Or just Led Zeppelin.
Or just Led Zeppelin. Yeah, Immigrant Song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is I think, Shark, you're gonna have to correct my terminology, but I think that song can safely be described as slapping.
Yeah, it does. It does a slapping.
It does. Yeah. It does a slap.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It does a slap. It's slooped. I think
Yes.
is the past tense.
Yeah, that is what the kids say.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And there's another dimension here, because Daniel is the creative mind behind the music project Fall of Odin. It's a really solid EP that you should check out. It's on Bandcamp. Now, Daniel, do you remember when we were at a deli and you got real weird about all of this? You started sweating and twitching and repeating, "I'm not a Nazi, Aaron." Can you tell us about that?
Yes. The sweating might have been a little due to the food we were eating. No, it was not.
It's a lot of meat at that deli.
It was a lot of meat. No, I mean, so I have always, all right, let me kind of frame it in a way to where I still apologize. So my wife does a lot of social justice work, and I have always valued, I think, I mean, ultimately I would actually, all right, I'm gonna have to start that over. Long story short, let's say this.
Okay.
A white guy getting into white guy stuff looks very white guyish. When, it's like, I am a 6'6", blondish, blue-eyed male.
And where did you go on your vacation the last time you took
we
one?
went to Iceland. We went to Iceland. And we definitely visited, where the Eddas were written, the poetic and prose Eddas. And I mean, it was a trip of a lifetime. It was like, that was, and I've always had an interest in the mythology of it. It's like, the idea of the Odin figure, the idea of the Christ figure, the idea of the sacrificial God, that kind of thing. It's been fascinating to me. It's like, because people want, kind of a relatable God that still is outside of their abilities. It's like, not everyone is going to be able to sacrifice themselves for something else, especially for something as broad as like, salvation or, knowledge and wisdom. It's like, these are lofty things that sacrificing yourself for is a hard thing for regular human beings to do. So we idealize these figures, but looking at kind of the Norse mythology aspect, it's in its own way, because I was raised Christian, so it's like I grew up in a lot of the church, and I grew up with a lot of the kind of anti-factual aspects of the church. And I'm like, what? If I'm gonna believe, quote unquote, in something, I want to believe in something fun. I want to believe in something that it's like I have heretical ties to, and that is fun. World trees, great. It's like 8-legged horses, fantastic. That kind of stuff. Ravens, wolves, giant snakes. This is trolls, frost giants. The entire idea of it all is way more fascinating than almost any other religion, really. The only other one I think that would kind of rival it is Hinduism. Hinduism is ridiculous with their gods and all that.
Hinduism's got a lot of cool shit in it, yeah.
Which also got co-opted with the fucking swastika. So it's like,
even on a more boring level, Western astrology took a lot from.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Just new age.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of the as far as the co-opting aspect, it's like. It's one thing to actually have a historical, interest and a genuine interest in something that you connect with or whatever, and it's another thing to just tattoo a Valknut on your chest because you think it looks cool, and you know what? These other guys who I hang out with really like it too. It's like, oh, it turns out those other guys are pretty nutty. They like doing Nazi shit.
Oh boy, they're just some nuts.
Well, hey guys, what are you going to do this weekend? You want to go storm a Capitol? So it's like it's. I think the casual kind of aspect of it is silly to me. I think that also though, and this is where I'm going to apologize for it. Me getting into something like this, or even if it was Celtic, stuff, which I've studied Celtic mythology and stuff like that too. There is an element of over romanticizing a traditionally white culture or something like that. Something that was not true in its own way. Viking history is actually pretty nutty and pretty diverse as far as that goes. But just kind of the thinking of like, you identify with this Germanic group. I mean, you look at, Wagner, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and Nietzsche, it's like they idealized these, pure, primal beings, whether it was the Vikings or whatever. But it's, so that's the apology. I'm like, I don't want it to look like I don't understand the context of
all of this is in the liner notes for Fall of Odin.
Yes. It's actually what I tattooed on my arm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
No. And the Fall of Odin, it's like that for me was blending several different types of music and several different types of ideas, and I read 6 runes, and I wrote a song a month for each rune. So 6 months from solstice, summer solstice to winter solstice. And, it's like, and I studied the particular rune for a particular month. And then I wrote a song about it. And, it's like, it actually turned out way more cohesive than I would have expected, given the kind of context of that. But, it was a blend of folk and metal and it's all instrumental except for some, Nordic, pieces here and there, but it was meant to express the idea of the rune. It's like, because the runes aren't just random symbols that Nazis can co-opt. They actually do have meaning within a and there's a lot of other stuff historically about that too, but they do have a traditional kind of meaning behind each rune.
And there are also those things that you socket in items in a specific order in Diablo 2 Throne of Baal, which is my only context for runes. So again, I'm really glad that you're here because, I invited you because you've got a lot of opinions on this stuff. You know what runes are. And so that's, I hope you're psyched. I'm psyched. Shark is vibrating just with excitement. So for my part, all of this, my run-ins with this stuff, like Daniel to a lesser extent, often do with my interest in Norse mythology. I read Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. I read
which is fantastic
Norse mythology books when I was a kid. I played Age of Mythology, the strategy video game, which is very good.
God of War.
I still haven't played that one. It is on my wish list on Steam.
I started it and I have not made it past the first chapter because it was way more complex than the game I was playing previously.
Yeah,
and I was like, I need to learn.
I've also played interactive documentaries like Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And
yes,
for my money, in terms of historical people who get labeled as either like proto-Nazis or the ultimate goal of the Nazi genetic plan, there is no comparison to the Norse.
Which I think is like such a straight, like, never mind. Nazis don't know history.
I got pages on this. Yes. We're going into archaeology, my friends.
I was about to I'm sure talk about some of the stuff you're going to talk about.
Yeah, well, you know what the next sentence is in this script?
What is it?
So, friends, what do you two know about the Vikings? ?
I got into a very funny debate recently. The like weird fucking losers who are like, it doesn't matter how you identify. In 2,000 years, an archaeologist dig up your bones. They're not going to know if you're a man or a woman. Do you know that particular brand of online lunatic?
It reminds that I don't know that brand of online.
Oh yeah,
but
I was like,
those.
today I learned everyone dug up is neither male nor female. It's all right.
well, it sounds like people who just don't know what anthropology and archaeology
Yes.
are.
And there's a truly great show of that because one of the main Viking burials they dug up in Victorian times, and they were like, this dude's got like a big axe and he's buried with a horse, and this is so fucking metal. He must have been a great warrior. Girl. Recent discovery. Fun stuff.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And like Daniel, you know a lot about this. Out of the shelves that we can see in the background, how many are dedicated to Viking books?
Oh, Jesus Christ. If you don't count the Norwegian books on the top,
Well, I mean,
contemporary writing
okay.
by contemporary Norwegian authors.
Oh, I think I know
yeah.
what you're talking about.
Oh yeah. Which we don't need to get into.
We don't
that.
need to go into that one.
That's a different subject altogether.
That's a different subject.
I mean, it's not, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
It's actually re-co-opting, which is a weird thing.
We're not.
Yeah.
Skip.
No.
Skip.
No. Yeah, skip.
Forward.
The second to top, the one below that, and the one below that are all having to do mostly with either Iceland or Vinland or Viking sagas and such. I actually have I just got back, as we mentioned earlier, from Iceland, and I actually have an Icelandic version of the Prose Edda that I got at the Snorri Sturluson Museum in Iceland, and I don't know how to read Icelandic, but I hear it's beautiful.
It's a language that has different letters, so you can't just stumble your way through it. Even but I mean, I have J.R. I've got Tolkien in there. I've got the Norse mythology by Neil Gaiman too, which actually the audiobook is the best. He reads it amazingly. Yeah, I've got that.
And it is he explains these are stories told over campfires when you're experiencing 24 hours of darkness. It's like that there's the Norse mythology being spoken out loud as these larger than life stories, are meant to be enjoyed. It's like that. And they had to entertain themselves. I mean, it's again, 24 hours of darkness for months, that's a lot of dark.
Much like Michael Crichton's Eaters of the Dead, which must be read aloud, really.
It's yes, that's the next shelf down is all Michael Crichton.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you're talking about the Icelandic version of the Prose Eddas. A friend of mine gave me I don't know why where he found it, but it was a Hungarian translation of Sholem Alekem's like Tevye the Dairyman stories. So that's the closest I have to going into the roots.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. So, all right, overview. Chime in when you feel like it. Broadly speaking, the term Viking, as used popularly, refers to Norse culture from the 800s to the 1100s. Again, after that, generically speaking, the applicability starts tapering off if Scandinavian people adopted Christianity and more continental European feudal societal traits. Geographically, the people we refer to when we say Viking came out of Scandinavia, mainly Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and through a series of explorations, invasions, raids, trading, etc., spread out from Scandinavia to what is today Russia, Ukraine, the British Isles, Iceland, France, Italy, and here and there the Balkans.
And
briefly,
Canada.
Briefly they wound up in North America, up near Newfoundland. Occasionally you get like these articles of like runestone found in Oklahoma, but it's Newfoundland. Don't believe those stories. That was a bored Swede in the 1800s carving in those rocks. More specifically, the term Viking was specifically applied to warriors and raiders. The term, it is thought, comes from an old Norse word, Vikingur. If you've experienced the highly accurate historical interactive documentary Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you probably know all this. These Norse groups were warriors, explorers, and traders. The Vikinger aspect of the culture was only one facet. They developed methods of shipbuilding that allowed them to travel across great lengths of seas as well as continental river systems. Doing so gave them the ability to connect to lands far away. They built a trade settlement system and network along nearly every major river system in Europe, establishing settlements in the British Isles, France, Sicily, and they held significant presence and influence in Constantinople under the Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire or the Roman Empire, however cheeky you're feeling. The problem with studying the Vikings, though, is that they did not tend to have written records of their culture. From what we know, pre-Christian Norse peoples relied on oral traditions to pass along their stories and histories. The exceptions to this are runestones, monuments carved in large stones that often detailed conquests, mass conversions to Christianity, or battles between kings.
Fun fact there.
Yeah.
Evidence of Vikings at the is it the Hagia Sophia? Is that the name of the church now? Yes. There are Viking runes carved into a banister on the second level of this church.
This is, they got bored.
And literally it says Halfdan was here. So it's literally like a graffiti little tag that he just says Halfdan was here, because I can imagine him. I can see this warrior being, conscripted into some, douchebag's army, his Varangian guard, and he's, supposed to be protecting him, but protecting him also means going to his church. So he's sitting there through this 3-hour long, you got to stand, you got to sit ceremony, and he's just carving away. and that I love that. I love that.
That's one of the reasons you can track their movements across Europe and like the Middle East to some extent.
Graffiti.
Is like they all got bored and just like carving shit into walls. It's good stuff. People never change.
Yep.
So if you've studied the Celts and their religion at all, which Daniel has, you kind of run into a similar dilemma. A lot of what we have to rely on are findings from archaeological digs or outside accounts. Findings from digs are wonderful because they are firsthand accounts that can point us in general directions of beliefs, can help us identify timeframes through use of carbon dating and the like, and can frankly humanize a very academic study. The catch about them is that it relies on being able to surmise and deduce. You can make educated guesses on what people believe based on what you find in excavated ruins or graves, but you won't know for certain. So what we can tell from the Vikings, from archaeology, and we'll get into some other sources in a little bit here, is that they believed in some kind of afterlife. They liked their weapons, and they ranged far and wide. Evidence for the first and second bit's pretty non-controversial. You see Norse burial mounds ranging from Scandinavia to the British Isles to North America to the Baltic. One of the most famous of these burial mounds is the Sutton Hoo site in England. This gave us a great picture of what the Norse thought was important to take with them when being buried, and from there we can extrapolate some information about what they as a culture valued. If you're interested in this and didn't read about it in high school, you can find an almost infinite amount of books about it in your local library. Or you can watch
come visit me.
Or come visit Daniel. His address is.
Yes, please.
Or you can watch a thoroughly mediocre movie called The Dig about British aristocrats doing British aristocratic things while dreading the onset of World War II. It's not that great of a movie. It's very mumblecore. You probably shouldn't watch The Dig. Ralph Fiennes is in it.
Yes, he did.
Big fan of Ralph Fiennes.
He played a mediocre man, so it made sense that he did a mediocre job.
Yeah. The acting.
I think he did fine.
It's just
he did
script.
fine.
It's the script, and it's just dull.
Yeah.
He did come out as pro J.K. Rowling, though.
Of course he did. Oh well. Can't win them all, I guess. I don't know what that appropriate reaction is.
You have to immediately stop liking him. He had an opinion you didn't like, Aaron.
All right. I guess you're right.
It was Ray Fiennes. I don't know which of the Fiennes was Voldemort.
I was like, more like Ray.
That was Ray
Fiennes.
You.
That was Ray Fiennes.
Yeah. Well, maybe the way we should degrade Ray Fiennes is say Ralph. It's Ralph Fiennes.
Ralph Fiennes. Yeah. He actually went by Ralph Fiennes for quite some time.
I'm sure.
As credited,
It's Ralph. You say it's pronounced Rafe. It's Rafe
with an F.
Yes, Rafe. The second bit, the Vikings ranging far and wide, is where things get interesting. You see, everyone can basically agree on the fact that Vikings went all over the place. Again, Europe, North America, they dipped their toes into Asia Minor as mercenaries and guards for the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantines, Roman Empire, the Greeks. I don't know what people want to refer to them as. I've been playing a lot of Crusader Kings 3 lately. My mind is just weird right now. But what gets interesting is when you consider the impact that this had on the Vikings as a culture distinct from a purely Scandinavian people. If you listen to the right wing to any extent about this stuff, you'll get the sense that these deluded fools, and I'm going to start calling them Draugr for the rest of this episode, you'll get the sense that these Draugr really need the Vikings to be a race of pure-blooded Ubermenschen who never brought foul, non-white bloods into their gene pool. It's something that gets brought up a lot in kind of a mask-off sense by folks like Vard Vikernes or Stephen McNallen of the Astatru Folk Assembly.
Famed things soldiers never do. Fuck.
Never.
Yep,
They
never.
Not fans of that.
They are always
speaking.
chased for their trad wives back home.
Yeah.
And we'll be diving into Varg and McNallen in depth in our part 2 of our chat. But for now, suffice it to say that their worldview, A, sucks, and B, does not permit the possibility of tolerant Vikings. The trick is...
Go ahead.
No,
you go ahead. No,
all right.
I know what we're going into, but I wanted you to... Yes, let's keep going.
Okay. The trick about all this is based on what we see in archaeological finds. The Vikings were very tolerant, aka they like to fuck. In evidence of this, I point us to a report in Eureka Alert discussing a study done in the journal Nature. The authors based the findings on a study of, quote, cutting-edge DNA sequencing of more than 400 Viking skeletons from archaeological sites scattered across Europe and Greenland. To put it succinctly, the study's focus spanned the breadth of the Viking Age and found genetic markers in remains that point to a richly diverse population makeup from just about everywhere the Vikings touched. This meant, according to evidence, A, they fucked.
We're all Vikings.
B, we're all Vikings. And C, you could see Southern Europeans mixing with Scandinavians wherever trade routes took you. The study showed intermarriage with other populations. It pointed to the Vikings mingling pretty freely on a large scale with the people they encountered on their travels. They were also willing to welcome outsiders into their own culture. More broadly speaking, what this means is summed up by Kat Jarman of the Oslo Museum of Cultural History, who said, these identities aren't genetic or ethnic, they're social. To have a backup for that from DNA is powerful. And I think that's huge because like the whole like social aspect of cultures is not really talked about when there's discourse happening. People tend to just kind of go with
and a lot of that is because they did not have the written records. It's like there wasn't any kind of structured, identifiable. It was just like we saw where the Vikings went. We know kind of what they did, but that's it. So the belief structure itself of Viking, culture, Snorri Sturluson is mostly responsible for this belief system, which was written in the 1200s. So this is, hundreds of years after the archaeological Vikings, actually went out and raided and the great heathen army and all that. But Snorri Sturluson himself was a chieftain in Iceland who had converted to Christianity. Iceland itself had been converted to Christianity in about 999,000 AD. So there is debate and legitimate debate on how much we really actually attribute the Viking history of their culture and social and mythology to a Christianized interpretation of what already existed. So you still got Thor, you still got Odin, but now these gods have a little bit more of a different meaning. Odin stabbing himself in the side with a spear and hanging from a tree sounds pretty Jesus-y. It's like this,
and we're gonna touch on Balder as well in a little bit.
Absolutely,
the idea that he might not have actually been a
Yeah.
figure in the
And that's just where it gets hairy. That's just where it gets hairy about trying to, prescribe and ascribe certain I don't know, the kind of a fundamentalist aspect, that a lot of right wing, highly Germanic, whatever kind of thing. It's like you're pulling from a complete fabrication of what actually existed,
and you're not really approaching it at it like an analytical perspective.
at all. It's complete. Absolutely.
And this discussion, the importance of this is not lost on modern practitioners of heathenry or paganism or whatever term you'd like to use for it. One guy who says a lot about, kind of thing that you're saying is a guy named Carl Siegfried, who is described in a write-up I found from The Atlantic, which reads, he takes inspiration from the social justice-oriented Catholic theologians of Latin America, who created liberation theology in the 50s and 60s. He's a Godi, or roughly speaking, something equivalent to a rabbi. It's not a priest, but someone who acts in a position of being able to advise co-religionists and speak with authority about the central bits of a faith. It is, before we go any further, important to note that there is, at current, no central authority in paganism or heathenry, and it is a very individualistic practice, even more so than Judaism or a lot of mainstream religions. But for now, let's talk about Siegfried's comments on the finds we were talking about earlier from Nature. In a column on his website, The Wild Hunt, Siegfried writes, quote, "There are many ways to build diversity, but the simplest is to do what the Vikings did. We must leave our comfort zones and safe spaces, go to where the rest of the world lives, and welcome a diverse range of people into this thing we do. There has been a concentrated effort to poison the phrase affirmative action, and I've seen prominent promoters of, quote, inclusive heathenry revert to white nationalist talking points when these two words come up together. Yet we mostly all agree that this is a religion of deeds, and I hope we agree that affirmative deeds are preferable to negative deeds. Let's move past the propagandistic rhetoric and focus on direct engagement with our neighbors that builds diverse communities in our religion. Over the past decade, American heathen organizations have made clear efforts to make themselves more welcoming to LGBTQIA plus individuals, including reassessing their theologies and ritual practices. The result has been that a broader representation of sexualities and genders are now publicly visible in these groups, including at clergy and leadership levels. With that experience of positive organizational change leading to welcome demographic change, what can U.S. heathen organizations do to emulate the Vikings as we now know them and embody an ethno-racial diversity that lives up to the promises of this nation? What changes can be made to what we say and do that makes heathenry more overtly welcoming to a more broadly defined range of people and more celebratory of their presence? And most importantly to us here, to this chat, he takes a look at why this is important in the first place. Why, in other words, the Draugr, the right-wing knuckleheads, try to lean on the image of them replicating a Viking lifestyle. Siegfried writes, "It's not only the neo-Volkish versions of heathenry that fixate on our glorious forefathers as arch-heathens who shared a worldview that the contemporary American practitioners of post-1972 heathenry must honor as a sort of aspirational Platonic ideal. There's a widespread obsession with origins, with antiquity as a marker of authenticity, and with more supposedly undiluted purity of the long ago time as more true. Scandinavians of the Viking Age are hailed in ritual as ancestors who fought wicked Christian invaders, in oppositional narratives sometimes veering into condemnation of desert religions that shares rhetoric with anti-Semitism and Islamophobia." And I think that hits it on the head. The central reason a lot of people look back on the Vikings as a model for religion or society at all is this obsession with origins, with antiquity as a marker of authenticity. More specifically, I think it's that question of authenticity that we have to really talk about in order to get why this is something that people are willing to fight about.
Yeah, I think that gets into something that I'm always really interested in. And Daniel touched on with the guy who wrote down the 8 Us being Christian, is that when you spend your life studying classics, you inevitably have to confront the question of these guys would fucking hate me if they met me. Like across the board, pretty much. Whether you're talking about Plato and Aristotle, or the people who wrote the Bhagavad Gita, or Sun Tzu, or insert culture here, it's the divide is so much wider than like could possibly be imagined. It's hard to contextualize how long 100 years is, let alone 1,000, let alone 2,000. Like it's an impossible project to claim authenticity for that reason.
Well, and actually that brings up, I mean, not necessarily even related to Vikings, but Jean-Paul Sartre wrote Nausea, which was almost exactly about that. The main character, is writing a biography history of somebody who existed prior, and it's all about the authenticity of it, and how can he know any of that when he barely knows himself, kind of thing. And it's like and trying to be able to be your authentic self. I mean that Sartre at least kind of expresses, which I think the Vikings did too, because I mean if you think about a lot of their, well, let me start with Sartre then. It's he's basically saying the past doesn't necessarily even matter. It's like that kind of aspect. And the Vikings thought the same thing, in a sense. It's like the past wasn't there to be, dug into and researched and analyzed. It was like, no, right now, right here is the actual moment. There is no future, there is no past, there is the moment. And I think that in general, I think that has a broad appeal, to a lot of different people. Kind of, but that, I mean, and that is the irony though of 2000, years later or whatever, people kind of associating with something that actually didn't exist, but they want to mythologize their own mythologies. It's
that was not to be like,
you first.
Not to be as Jordan Peterson would say, postmodern neo-Marxist. But there's like this idea, I mean, Sartre's a great person to bring up for this, because I think it is like a historical existentialism in a sense.
Yeah.
Like there's no there. History is a story we tell ourselves. Like believe in the history that provides you meaning, because that's what you're going to fucking do anyway. Everything else is bullshit.
That's exactly right.
I've been watching this video series of like lectures by historian and kind of consultant guy named Timothy Snyder, who does a lot of like focus on Eastern Europe. And the video series is The Making of Modern Ukraine. And it's like at Yale. So the semester started in September. And it's the first lecture is just kind of like setting everything up. And one of the things he's hitting on is like what the conflict in Ukraine right now is a clash of two narratives, two mythologies about the same region.
Yeah.
And it's that thing of like people need a mythology to latch onto, and this can escalate into the sorts of violence that we're seeing now.
Well, and the irony is the Vikings founded that. To tie it back in.
It was all this whole thing was founded by a Norse dude with a Bulgarian name of Vladimir. It's all just a big soup, the human soup. And so as part of this human soup, this whole obsession with origins and authenticity and everything, we're already talking about it with whether you can really trust the Eddas, because the author was a Christian guy who was trying to mythologize his own thing for his own benefit and power structure, while drawing on presumably some older sources.
He was the Michael Crichton.
He was the Michael Crichton.
He
was the Michael Crichton of Iceland.
And for anyone who doubts the like radical effect that someone trying to like honestly do good classical work, but like the effect that just being a person, the time and place can have, like no one needs to be talked about more in all this than like Plato is such a great example. Like ancient Greek dude who we lost pretty much all of his writings of, that got translated into Arabic, then retranslated from Arabic by Christians.
Yeah.
And you get these like, you'll be reading Plato and you'll be like, wow, man, if you read the wrong translation, you'll be like, wow, man, this guy really like Christianity really ripped this
Loves
guy
God,
off. And then you flip to the back and it's like, oh, the translator's a guy named Michael Jallett, who's a Jesuit priest. He existed in this time, and he just made God like, and he was like a devoted classicist who really tried.
And it's like, this is why the liberal arts are important, and and why I go to bat for studying in university, because you're not gonna it's gonna be very, very hard to pick up on all this stuff on your own.
And that is exactly kind of the issue that we're talking about, is people who don't necessarily understand, the context and the history, just see something and say like, oh yeah, that's Nazi, or it's like, oh yeah, that's Nazi and I like it. It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's Nazi, give me more.
Yeah, and it's like, and there is no real context, there is no real like historical perspective, or critical analysis, or even translation analysis, that none of that exists in just the propaganda, or the the immediate messaging of
Dan, I mean,
shitheads who want to
you go back to the current war in Ukraine, and like you see missile strikes hitting central Kyiv with the cathedral in the background. It's like that cathedral is rebuilt of like a Norse Christian church and layers. And I've been on that hill. There's a big statue of Vladimir with like a big cross looking over the river to the east. And it's like, there's all of these layers of myth. And it's like, we can't answer these questions. And we're kind of talking about them in like almost an academic, theoretical way. But for people who really, truly believe that they are worshiping Thor, or that they're receiving blessings from Freya, these are really important things for them. And they have interpretations and are willing to fight for them. So it just so happens that some of these people are welcoming individuals who see the world's diversity as something to be celebrated. And some of them are Draugr, who sometimes get released from their deep crypts, aka mother's basements, and decide to shoot up a synagogue. Yeah. Now, all of this about paganism and Valhalla and Ragnarok and Snorri Snorrason, it's all very important. So we have to spend a little bit more time, even more time, going into what we know or think with great certainty about what the Norse believed and how that relates to what it is practiced today. Context. One of the sources, aside from archaeology, for our knowledge of the Norse belief system, and by extension, the early Germanic belief system, is Roman authorship. Kind of going back to what you're talking about with like Plato.
Unbiased source, the Roman.
Oh, completely
unbiased. And it specifically refers to people like Caesar and Tacitus. And you can't escape the Latin bias.
But here's just kind of a precursor, sorry. To pre all this.
Context for the context.
Yes, context for the context. The interpretation of Vikings to Romans and to many outsiders in a lot of ways, but especially kind of the Greco-Roman is kind of this savage warrior and this and that. And then if you actually look at archaeological digs, you see these fancy fucking combs, these like grooming kits. They bathed like daily. It was like this.
It's like the Romans painted everyone. The Greeks did it too. Like
they're
anyone
either dirty
that was
savages
not
or
there's a book that Crichton based his Eaters of the Dead.
Are you serious, Michael Crichton again?
Well, the book is what was it, like Voyage Along the Volga or something like that, and it's written by an Arabic courtier who's going to establish a trade mission with the Volga.
Oh no, it's not the same one. That the longships.
This is actual nonfiction. Like this is a travel journal written by
so was the Longships, okay?
Longships is fantastic.
It was actually written at the time. It was contemporary.
Angry Jews included on the boat.
Yes.
It's a wonderful book. But no, the travel journal is like, talking about, it's the same thing that the Romans were doing. Like you have these Vikings on I think it's the Volga, and the author is this very educated dude from Baghdad who is painting them as these unwashed heathens who are just committing vast acts of heresy in God's full sight. And he's like, I just want to be done with this. I want to be back to Baghdad where people are not doing what these people are doing. But yeah, it's like they had fancy shit. And like
to be fair, they were probably more clean than the Vikings, for sure.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, if you look at actual like kind of other Roman areas at the time, they were pretty dirty, despite the fantastic sewage system.
Oh yeah. Now it's like one of the things that's like complicated specifically about Romans and Vikings, just to pull us back into the context, is in addition to painting them as bloodthirsty barbarians, they kind of graft Roman gods onto Germanic gods. So you have like Caesar and Tacitus writing about Hermes cults in Germany, which is obviously not correct. So it's like you have historians kind of have to play this game of like, well, what god are they referring to, and what traits could they match it on to?
It's the same thing with Jack Kerouac and a lot of his books. You got to figure out who's, Allen Ginsberg this time, who's Gregory Corso this time. I don't know. It's the same kind of thing.
Same thing. So, Daniel, as our resident Northman, I would like you to give us a high-level overview of what some of these beliefs are that the Vikings might have held.
Yeah, well, some of the main ones, that again, this is all relatively conjecture in a sense. So I'm just going to start by saying this is what is agreed upon, not necessarily what is, or what was. But you had a pantheon of gods that actually mingled within the realm of man. It's like Odin disguised himself as a poet or a beggar or a traveler or wanderer, and would walk around Midgard, which was Earth, and mingle with the people. If you want to get into
Midgard is Earth because it's a planet, and the Norse were gods on another planet called Asgard, and Chris Hemsworth was
and
Thor.
Hemsworth, yes,
yeah.
And if you remember,
how dare
all
you,
gods
Hemsworth,
have abs.
You're thinking Richard Dean Anderson. The Asgards are little gray people.
Yeah, you're
Come
right.
on.
I should have gone with that. Why didn't I go with Stargate? Fuck, I should have gone with Stargate.
No, I mean, they have their own specific origin, story as well, like creation story, about blood and semen, and it's a fantastic origin story. But as far as like what they kind of believed in their day-to-day lives, because there were priests, that actually knew those backstories of the creation myths and all that. But as a day-to-day person, you would know that it is better to die in battle and in glory than it is to die of old age, or to die a coward, or this or that. And when you died, you would be welcomed by the Valkyries into Valhalla, and Valhalla, where you would basically wake up, drink and eat, go fight each other, die, and wake up again and drink and eat, and then go and fight each other and then die again. And it's this glorious repetition of finding new ways to kill and be killed. But I mean, and that would kind of be almost the extent of the daily, everyday person's knowledge of that kind of stuff. It's like, and they would know who Thor was, they would know who Odin was, they would know who Freya is, and there's kind of a main 3 or 4 kind of, and you see this displayed in runestones, like you were talking about earlier. These runestones reference specific gods. It's like, and actually sometimes even the Christian God, which is fun too. But as far as just kind of the day-to-day Viking, it's like you would have maybe a god that you would pray to, that you would wear an amulet, or the Mjolnir, kind of necklace, and tattoos were actually prevalent in that time as well. So it's like you might have a tattoo that relayed your connection to this god or protection from that god or whatever. So the kind of the day-to-day belief was pretty kind of practical. It wasn't some sort of God will save me, I should pray to God, and it was the gods are neither good nor bad. They kind of are just there with us, and they're also good and bad, and we're good and bad, and
they're people at a different level.
Yeah, that's almost it. They were supernatural, so to speak, and could do supernatural things like fight giants and whatever, but they weren't, some sort of like devil and God kind of thing. It was much more complex than that, and they were seen as more of a fellowship and communion with them, as opposed to like a worship and praise of them.
Yeah. I think kind of like the one takeaway would be that the Eddos is not really, it's not like the Tanakh or the Christian Bible.
No, not at all.
It's like a view of cosmology.
And there is the Havamal, which is the sayings of the wise one. It's Odin's sayings that are kind of like a book of Psalms or a book of Proverbs kind of thing.
Why they keep calling Odin that name in the interactive documentary Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
What do they call him?
Javi, I think.
Oh yeah.
It's
the name of the book, basically, or a reference to. I didn't know that, and I really want to play that game. To be honest, I don't know if my PS4 would be able to handle it.
We should meet up at the deli at some point, and I can tell you the pros and cons of experiencing the interactive documentaries.
I finally just started playing Black Flag. Obviously the pirate documentary.
For the sake of time, I gotta skip.
Sorry. Yeah, but and so they do have kind of like the book of sayings. It's like when somebody crosses your front door, do this. When somebody, so there are a little bit of like relations to certain aspects of the Quran, the Bible, the Tanakh, but at the same time, it's nothing like that at all.
It's a unique thing that is not an Abrahamic religion, and it's not like the same as other pagan religions.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is going to be important. So put a pin in that, because we're going to get back to that with one of our shitheads. So all of this question of like authorship and authenticity and yada, yada, yada poses a problem for the people who practice the any form of paganism today. Without a clear picture of what the Vikings believed at a quote unquote authentic state, much less one that is not translated into writing by a Christian, you get some gaps here. Several organizations and loose schools of thought have kind of cropped up since at least the 70s to fill in those gaps. And this is not intended to be an exhaustive list of those organizations, and it is not an exhaustive list of what those people believe. But it does have, what we're going to be talking about has a lot to do with what we're going to be talking about next. So listen up. Thank you. Organizations like the Astatru Folk Assembly formed in Iceland. A specific name for the religion, Astatru, became a gathering focus for people. Some other people chose to worship Odin specifically and became Odinists. Others decided to take a broader scope and coalesced under reconstructive heathenry in an attempt to look at source material and determine what the original practitioners believed. Now, there are articles about... Yeah.
Are you saying religion gets complicated?
Yeah, I know. Shocking.
Nah.
Despite
it's all very simple.
I feel like I don't know what order we're gonna decide on putting these out, but just refer to our new atheist discussion whenever that comes out, and whenever this, who knows. There are articles about those efforts and sources as varied as the Atlantic, the New York Times, and various think tanks. For a movement that is described in the Atlantic as existing in about 100 countries with an estimated following in the tens of thousands, you can probably imagine how messy it gets. It gets complicated. One of these articles, unsurprisingly in the Times, finds a likely... I forgot about this. This is great. Finds a likely a guileless, reedy putz of a reporter. I imagine him just in like a cardigan, wildly unprepared for winter in Iceland. Just attending a ceremony in Iceland. And there he asks the practitioners, but are you Nazis? Love the New York Times.
Thing about New York Times reporters is that if you're ever at a place where one of them is also hanging out, they are immediately the most identifiable person in the whole world.
Yep.
Like, oh, you are from the East Coast.
Well, and they probably saw Midsummer, and
I think this article came out before Midsummer.
okay.
But
And I was going to also
Insert
say,
Wicker
no,
Man
it came
or
out
any
after
other.
Midsummer. It was after Midsummer. Yeah,
no,
you're
but what
right.
was also the movie back in the 20s that basically 20s that spurred the KKK? Was that the
Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation? They watched both of those back to back and just I'm you know what? I'm going to Iceland. I'm going to figure this out.
I'm gonna crack this case. So this putz got the response. I am so sick of these questions. And this was said by Stenar Sonvig, the spokesman of the pagan group, the Nordic Asa community. Is it Asa or is it Asa?
It's Asa, or
Asa.
I mean, to be honest, it's either Asa or Asa, really.
All right, we'll go with Asa.
Yeah.
The chant that this reporter had witnessed was explained by Mr. Sundvig as it has nothing to do with the Nazis. I promise you. The chant he was referring to sounds a lot like Heil. So you can imagine this idiot who has no conception of the meaning of things outside of a narrow worldview informed by Midsummer and Birth of a Nation, thinking that he stumbled upon a bunch of Nazis.
And Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And Raiders of the Lost Ark, of course. Now, there's a lot to talk about on the European side of these things, but for our scope and for the sake of sanity, we're going to limit ourselves solely to the American interpretations of heathenry. For a lot of this episode and the next one, I'm going to be leaning on the work of Carl Siegfried, who we were talking about earlier, but there are a lot of accessible sources on this topic. One guy I found is a YouTuber who goes by Ocean Keltoy. He is a friendly bearded man who likes him some puns. And he also gets into some baffling arguments with internet atheists about anti-theism. It's something to watch. And he has a lot of patience.
Repeat his name one more time.
Ocean Keltoy. And it is Keltoi. He's got some good stuff on there. I like him. So to be brief and probably flawed in regards to the genesis of the modern Norse heathen movement, we start in the 70s. This comes out of a time of new age wonkery and influence by folks like Aleister Crowley. The pagans of the 70s experienced a split into two parts. One part was the sort of pagans you wouldn't mind hanging out with, the kinds who function well in normal society, albeit a little weird, and have neat tattoos. Daniel. The other kind, other kind are the Volkish type. Now, the Volkish type are most notably represented by the Astatru Folk Assembly. We'll get into them more in detail in a little bit. But for right now, we're going to turn to Siegfried, who tells us, as part of an article titled Articles of Faith, quoting, after the split between Volkish and not racist, not only were individuals and writings able to move
like
freely,
a clear thesis.
Yeah. Right from the start. I like it.
Not only were individuals and writings able to move freely between the various branches that grew from a common racist trunk, but not racist practitioners did and do use concepts either created by the first Volkish American heathens or imported by them from 19th century Romantic nationalists, German Volkish mystics who influenced the Nazis, and actual Third Reich occultists. There remains to be written a detailed academic study of today's American heathen theology. So if you're looking to get a PhD, there you go.
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Every time I have a day of 7 hours of meetings. That's what I think about. More broadly, the article is a piece about the ownership of symbols associated with that specific brand of paganry. He quotes, I'm going to butcher this name, Helga Hladgerder Luther's daughter, a lecturer.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. A lecturer in Icelandic at University College of London, who said, quote, that the symbols are owned by no one, and explains some of the elements in play. This is a cultural heritage, but even so, something that is very much of a thing of the past and in no way alive in Nordic cultures today. Were these symbols Where these symbols have gained new lives is in congregations and kindreds of neo-pagans, and there symbols such as the Thor's hammer have absolutely new importance, a religious importance similar to the Christian cross. But this is not a cultural heritage, and I've never been able to accept arguments to that direction. What I'm hoping you're getting from this brief discussion is that in an atmosphere of open interpretation and a lack of strict religious importance to symbols, and further, in an atmosphere where there is no desire for a central authority to define tenets of faith, the ability of groups to define what they believe is difficult. And it is even more difficult to determine who is welcome and who is unwelcome. This is, I think you're getting, ample room for the right wing to start spreading its influence. See, even in the most open-minded and welcoming bits of this sort of heathenry, there's still the reckoning of dealing with symbols and stories that were used and embraced by the Nazis. This is what Siegfried refers to when he says, practitioners did and do use concepts either created by the first Volkish American heathens or imported by them, but from 19th century Romantic nationalists, German Volkish mystics who influenced the Nazis, and actual Third Reich occultists. It is, looking from the outside in, a battle for optics. Siegfried is aware of this, and he says in another article titled The Viking Age as a Model for Diversity, it's long past time to stop pretending that we don't recruit people into the religion. Of course we do. Whether in social media groups, at public events, or in private conversation, we talk to newcomers and help them over the hump from newbie to practitioner. We are modern people in a modern religion that looks to the past for inspiration. So let's be honest about what we do, embrace this direct message from the past, and turn from inclusivity to diversity. So, we're leaving this off at a point where modern heathenry is facing itself in the mirror and acknowledging that there is a capital Nazi, capital problem. This leads to folks like our friend Dr. Siegfried encouraging his co-religionists to confront the problem head on. To their credit, some groups in heathenry have taken the first steps to do so. The Astatru Fellowship in Iceland created a statement to this effect, which says, in part, quote, we particularly reject the use of Astatru as a justification for supremacy ideology, militarism, and animal sacrifice.
Wait.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt right there.
Yeah.
Animal sacrifice was absolutely a thing.
Yeah, but what the modern...
No, I know. The modern.
I
just
again,
just
modern
footnote.
religion for modern times. And
yes.
Yes. A veritable heathen horde has signed on to something called Declaration 127, which seeks to isolate the Astatru Folk Assembly, which again, we're going to get into our next episode, from the rest of the community. Still, the question remains, is this enough? Is it enough to merely put out statements online? Should the groups be more active in engagement with non-heathens? Should they, in fact, do exactly what the racists do? Build local trust, show up to farmers markets with their mead, and put on a nice face on the movement? Of course, my answer to that is yes. I am, however, not a heathen. I'm a vaguely atheistic Jew with a strong Zen influence on the way that I perceive the world. Frankly, I have no say in how heathens talk to each other or about each other. I do hope, however, that they do the right thing and confront the bastards wherever they show up. So, we're going to close out with a couple of questions. The first is, do you have any thoughts on what we've seen about contemporary heathenry? And second, do you have any predictions on what we'll see when we get into the weeds about fascists and mythology? Who wants to go first?
I'll kind of speak to a little bit of it in the sense that I, at one point, because I've been studying runes for years, and Norse mythology for longer, and I, at one point, was talking. I'm not 100% sure if my wife and I were married yet, but I had talked about possibly looking for a local heathen chapter or Astatru or something like that. And I strongly said no after a little bit of digging, just a little bit, and not necessarily because of their beliefs and not necessarily because of the outfits that they wore, but I more just realized like any kind of modern interpretation of a religion like Norse mythology. And I mean, it's like, again, I don't even necessarily call it a religion, even though I can say I practice it or whatever. It is a mythology, just like all mythologies. You know, it is a belief system that you choose to enjoy, and I don't let it dictate my life in that sense. And because of that, it's open to whatever I say it's open to, you know, it's like, and to that
Going back
degree.
to that individualistic.
Absolutely. Because I think that it was highly appropriate for them to be practicing like that. You know, there wasn't some organized religion of Viking religion. You know, there wasn't a religion. It was an individual belief, and you had your individual gods, and you had your, you know, so to even kind of congregate as such is almost counter to the kind of ethos, or the kind of you know, the manifestation of what it initially was anyways.
Have I ever told you the deserted island joke?
I don't think
so. This guy gets marooned on a desert island, and he's there for months, bordering on years. And eventually, you know, he's got a signal fire and goes up, and in this boat passing across the horizon sees it, and they go in to rescue him. You know, a couple of guys get out on the boat, they find him, and he's built a little, like, kind of little space for himself, right? So he comes out to meet them, and the people are like, "This is amazing. We're so glad you survived. We didn't think you were still alive, but we have to ask, why did you build 2 synagogues?" And the guy says, "Well, that one I go to, and that one I won't set foot in." And that's the vibe I'm getting from this.
I mean, that's kind of it. It's you know, if you want to cosplay as a Viking, if you want to, you know, go through rituals are extremely important for humans. You know, they really are. Rituals, you know, help kind of reaffirm and help give faith to the hopeless, you know, whatever you want to you know, call rituals. Or they're just addicts in that sense too. It's like people do, if you grew up Christian, in my sense, you know, it's like, and you need something to replace it with, you know, whatever. But it's like, if you want to do all those things, great. And do I think that the modern heathens and the modern, you know, practitioners of Astatru and whatever should include more people? 100%. You know, it's like, do I think that any kind of group that excludes based on race or based on gender, or, you know, whatever, it's like, yeah, you got to knock that off. That doesn't make any sense, and that's pretty ridiculous, because again, the Vikings fucked. You know, it's like, we're all Viking, so there shouldn't be any. If you want to say, oh, you have to wear the robes and you have to cosplay and you have to learn Old Norse, it's like, okay, that's a little more, you know, kind of niche to your subject. You know, it's going to be that. Okay, so yeah, maybe you exclude people because they refuse to learn Old Norse, whatever. But it's like, you know, for any kind of actual, if you want to call yourself organized religion, I think that aspect of modern day Astatru and whatever, you have to not prove, because prove is kind of not the right word, but basically prove that you're not a Nazi by not being a Nazi. You know, it's like, you've got to show that you are inclusive. You've got to show that, yes, okay, you know, we may stand for these things that are made up, but we also have a level of real values, and these real values include inclusiveness, and they include, you know, anybody who's interested. You know, it's like, it shouldn't be exclusionary based on you know,
this all ties into, like, you know, you're talking about organized religion, and it really drills home why it's so goddamn hard to get a good campaign going as an Astatru character in Crusader Kings 3, because you can't go feudal until you're part of an organized reformed religion. And in order to do that, you got to get all the holy sites, and those are all over the fucking place, man. It's a pain in the ass.
Which is actually the ultimate problem with the Vikings, which is why, you know, we don't really have them as a religion.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, seriously though, like, I don't know that you can say that it's a problem with, like, because it's like they were masters at adapting to a culture, right? It's like
100%.
The whole thing about the Rus was like they started as kind of like trade barons, and then we're like, oh, it's a lot easier to establish these trade things when you just adopt the culture of people around you.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it. It's just there was no exclusivity to their beliefs and culture. there wasn't anything like that, and that didn't exist in their mentality. Not even just like they chose to not do it. It's like that didn't exist, you know. And so it's hard to not have that kind of existing fundamentalist view in our day and age. You know, it's almost impossible for somebody to be raised without any kind of fundamentalist perspective on some sort of religion. Even if you're atheist, you're fundamentally atheist. You know,
everyone gets tainted by
absolutely
evangelical Christianity in this country,
and
it's horrible.
If you're thinking about 700, 800 AD in the middle of some fucking mountains, in Norway, it's like. Yeah, it was like a Native American, oral tradition, and it was like, they didn't believe in that aspect of
the fantastic documentary that came out earlier this year, maybe late last year, The Northman.
Yeah,
with
fantastic,
directed by famed documentarian Dave Eggers.
Eggers.
Yeah. So, how about you, Shark? What's your takeaway? What do you think we're gonna find as we really get into the filth? Because we haven't gotten near the filth yet.
I think there's it all really makes me think. I can't stop thinking about pursuing other much better documented classical traditions. And just I think about the Rome guys.
They're everywhere.
All of the founding fathers, for instance, were big Rome guys. All of the French revolutionaries were big Rome guys.
What's been your experience with not even nowhere near radical people, but just your average just fucking asshole being like, oh well, America's just like Rome. We're really falling. We're hitting the same points.
Launched them into the sun.
I keep running into this, and I'm like, there's a much easier touch point, much more modern, and it's Weimar Germany that you could be referring to.
Yeah, right.
We're not like Rome because we're nowhere near as interesting.
Well, it's such a weird. Hey, God.
Rome had
anyway,
a bunch
sorry. Go
of
ahead.
dudes who literally thought they were gods, essentially, and were willing to kill every single fucking person in the whole world. We just don't have that
I think if Biden were to appoint a horse as counselor, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, but I think as a person who went to Christian seminary and has gotten into paganism and has done a whole variety of things religiously in life, because I don't know, I get bored. There's this split that I always come down to where I'm getting into a religion, I'm really learning it, I'm really loving it, and then I hit a point where I start interacting with orthodoxy of any kind.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just it drives me nuts. Whenever I hit that point, whether it's happened to me in Judaism, it's happened to me in paganism, it's happened to me in Christianity, it's happened to me exploring Islam. And there's these people who are I talk to something that nobody can see and that has no impact on the world. And he told me 4 things that we always have to do. And it's holy fuck, my guy. Can you not? Can you just have fun with it?
The Dybbuk of a dead rabbi appeared to me and told me that we need to take our culture to a different. Yeah, it's just chill the fuck out, man.
And anytime you hit that orthodoxy person, it scares the shit out of me, because there is something bad is about to happen in whatever room you're in. When someone starts having those hard and fast opinions.
It's the Rasputin glint in their eye, right? It's this guy's gonna try and either fuck or kill me, and I don't want either of those right now. Yeah.
No, I think that's exactly right. It's and again, what I was talking about earlier, it's also coming from Christianity into more pagan, heathen, kind of aspect. Which so did Nietzsche, for that matter. He was balls deep in seminary, but it's when you kind of realize that religion itself is a framework of. I know this is going to sound shitty or cliche or whatever, but it's a framework of control, man. I mean,
it's like it's a drug.
It's almost like
it's an opiate.
no, but it's almost like that opiate is blocking the reality sensors to freedom, internal freedom,
to removing your chains.
Yeah, and I mean, and yeah, basically, you know, the dogmatic aspects, the fundamentalist aspects, no matter which religion you get into, breaks down, you know, the kind of freeing, fun aspect of, you know, it's like Spinoza in that sense. You know, it's like Spinoza was like, yeah, all right, whatever God it is, it's everything, and that's awesome, and it's amazing, and it's like, yeah, I kind of actually agree with that.
Did
It's
I
like,
tell you about that thing I found a while ago about like a researcher was doing an article about Spinoza and was trying to get access to the synagogue that he used to go to in Amsterdam. And the
one he got excommunicated from.
Yeah. And the shul said, no, Spinoza was an apostate, and so are you. You are banned.
Yeah.
That's the guy that's scary.
Yep, exactly.
There's this professor of mine who, when I knew him, was pretty hardline Jewish. He became hardline Jewish because he had sex with one of his students who was hardline Jewish, and so he converted. That's a total side note. Well, I'm sitting in a Bible class with him, and he says that the Old Testament is one of the worst books to go to if you want answers. You'll start doing horrible
you don't
shit.
go to that for answers.
Yeah, he says you should always go there to ask questions. And that's like, I think perfectly summarizes everything I feel about holy texts. Like, if you come out of there with answers, you fundamentally terrify me.
Yeah.
Well, I think I told you that Yom Kippur passed recently, and I was just like flipping through my little copy of the abridged Talmud, and there was a bit about like two rabbis are in a room in Baghdad. And this other guy comes in. He's like, I think I'm gonna tell the authorities where my straw is. And the main rabbi's like, don't do it. And the guy goes like, I'm going to. And so the rabbi slashes his throat and kills him. And they have to like bury the body. And the whole takeaway is like, don't narc to the authorities. It's just like a weird segue in a discourse between a bunch of rabbis about Yom Kippur. So again, it's the Jewish texts are kind of odd to go to for answers.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I was talking about earlier. It's just like, you know, having been raised in a fundamentalist kind of, you know, religion and this and that, it's like once I kind of realized that was more or less like helpful suggestions on how to live a morally, you know, good life for this or that, then I wanted to pick the best, funnest one. And it was like Norse mythology is fascinating.
It's the Led Zeppelin religion.
It's the Led Zeppelin of religion. That's 100% that. Yes.
Get the Zepp out.
What do you want? Is it going to be Sonny and Cher or Led Zeppelin?
Yeah,
come
you're
on.
You're going to get the Led out. You're going to go with Thor, man.
And I think like one of the most interesting ways this comes up for me is I like know a lot of people who are big fans of what I'd call Western Eastern mysticism.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the same process of like, it's just flattening history. Like there's so much going on. There's so much happening. Orthodoxy is absurd. Everyone's disagreed about everything forever. I keep circling back to the same point, but
no, I mean, they went through all that kind of stuff with Beat Generation and Buddhism and stuff like that. And it's like, honestly, I think they kind of had the right idea of Buddhism. You know, it was like, in the sense that like it wasn't about the fundamentalist aspect. You know, it's like if you want to write a haiku, it doesn't. The American haiku is in a sense just as good as the you know the Buddhist haiku. That's more what I mean. It's just that kind of not the actual translation of Zen Buddhism into American Zen Buddhism. Not that.
Okay.
I mean more. I mean more like the loose, like, hey, let's get high and talk about, you know.
Yeah, Buddha was a huge fan of getting high.
Oh yeah, he was the biggest pothead.
Yeah,
I guess that's my whole point. Is like be that person, get super high with your friends on the back porch, and be like, "What do you think about God?"
And just ask questions.
That's actually the whole fucking point.
Yeah. That really is it. And it's like, oh man, so he lives so imagine this tree, right? And there's 9 worlds in this tree, and there's goats eating the rooftop, and raccoons and snakes.
And it all comes from the blood and jizz and ice and tears of a giant.
Giants. Yeah, it's just so cool. That's so fun. Exactly. Meanwhile, it's playing in the background. Actually, I mean, if you've got Wolves in the Throne Room playing in the background, that works too. It's like there's a lot of good metal that goes along with Norse mythology. And again, also as an asterisk on that, be careful. Read the lyrics.
You gotta be careful. I mean, just listen to our metal episode about how every time I find a new band, I'm like, are they Nazis?
Yeah.
And it's especially black metal that gets real sketchy real fast.
Real quick.
And my one rule for double checking any religion is if anyone tells you have to wear a specific kind of hat at all times, be incredibly nervous. That's when it's about to get bad.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about earlier about finding like kind of a pagan group or an Astatru group. Yeah, and I'm like, I don't want to dress up. Can't I just show what I'm wearing?
I know a few other pagans around here, and I don't know. That was one of the main takeaways that I got from talking to them about all this was like, it's just the groups around here are either they're too like we got to do things this way, and it's.
And again, ritual is important. And if it was like, Halloween, sure, let's all dress up because that all makes sense. Let's dress up in crazy robes and this and that. But it's like if it's like, hey, every time we get together, we're gonna dress up in our robes and this and that. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Let's just drink mead and ask questions.
Speaking of mead, I got my mead right now.
Oh, see, I went with a cider.
Yeah,
I went with a cider. You know what? I should have gone down.
This is a plug for Weird.
Oh yes, literally a block and a half down the street from where I live, and I've only been there once, and that's a shame. Wait,
you're only a block and a half from there?
Yeah, it's right on Holgate, and I'm on Gladstone.
Buddy,
I know.
Buddy, all right. Well, that's going to be our next hangout. Listeners, if you find yourselves in Redacted, you should go to Weird Leatherworks in Meadery. It's a great place.
Oh yeah. I don't know. Is that backwards?
Daniel was holding up Viking Blood.
Right.
By Danskmjord.
Danskmjord.
Well, I feel like that's a good place to leave it off for episode 1. We've chatted a lot about context, a lot of heavy context about what's going on with contemporary heathenry now, where Vikings came from, the fact that they were pretty not cool because they did a lot of like burning and raiding and all that stuff, which does not really qualify as cool unless it's
there was still slave trading
here. Yeah. But for their time, they were very cool. So I think that's a good place to end episode 1. When we get back, we're gonna really have a sad time. So I hope you're excited for that, listener. I am.
Woo!
Was this halfway through the script?
This is halfway through the script.
Jesus fucking Christ, Aaron.